Welcome back, you sons of pitches. It is episode 20. We are 2 decades worth of episodes into the podcast. It's another milestone. We're going to keep growing, keep it moving. Today we have an episode of the UCL, the UEL, and the UECL. All the rounds of 16s have closed out. We also got some draw news. We'll do some reactions to those draws. Obviously, a couple of us have stakes. There's a little derby that's going to happen in a couple weeks. That's going to be fun on the pod, along with our other one with me and Jay. But we'll start, like always, with the Champions League, you know, the bigger competition of the 3. In the first game, we did see Porto and Arsenal duke out the same result, but in reverse as the first leg, where Arsenal won 1-0 at home, and they went all the way to penalties, where, unfortunately, Porto did choke, had some poor penalties, in my opinion. Raya, decent performance, obviously, on the line between the sticks. How did you guys feel about that game?
Well, I thought Arsenal played pretty good overall. I mean, I expected them to play as they did. They had majority of possession. They moved the ball in their usual Arsenal way. Once Trossard scored, I was kind of surprised they weren't able to find a second, but I think that was really just down to bad finishing throughout the rest of the second half and extra time. And then it went to penalties, and it's always a lottery when it goes to penalties. I think you're right. I thought Ryan had a pretty good performance. I did have some question marks about whether or not he was on his line. I was surprised there wasn't more checks about that. Because to me, at least the first penalty he saved, he looked like he was definitely off his line. But they let it stand. They let him make his saves, and he was definitely lucky with the one that went off the post. That's for sure. That ball could have gone anywhere. He didn't even know where it went. But Arsenal saw it through. I think it was the result that everybody expected on paper. I don't think it was the outcome in which it happened, but like I said, I think everybody expected Arsenal to go through, and they got the job done in the end.
Yeah, I can't believe just how much of a big game player Pep is, though. At 42 years old, the guy's put in a masterclass performance against arguably the most exciting attack in England right now, and still being able to keep up and not only just do the job, but really lead and be that force they needed. But no, credit to Porto. They played decent. I think we all wrote them off. The whole world probably wrote them off. That they had no chance, and they gave it until the last shot, pretty much. But yeah, I agree. I think Raya was great. Arsenal probably deserving of the win. But yeah, I agree that they get a little lucky. But when it comes to penalties, it's all about inches. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and speaking of the most exciting attack, I think one thing I'll say about this game is Ange had a bit of a hot take a couple weeks ago about how he was not impressed with Arsenal. And I think the fact that, you know, on paper, like you said, Jay, everybody would have expected Arsenal to go through in this game, and obviously they ended up doing so. They didn't do so convincingly, you know what I mean? It was like they squawked by on penalties, and I think Ange, you might have a couple words, but I'm sure you still feel the same, where Arsenal still haven't proven anything to you, even after getting to the next round of the Champions League.
No, yeah, you're exactly right. It is pretty much how I feel. I wanted to big up Pepe as well, Jay. The picture going around is unbelievable of him standing off Thierry Henry and then off of Trossard, I think it was. I forget how many years in between it was, but he looks the same. He still plays the same. I mean, so wise. I feel like he did great over both legs, and I feel really bad for Porto. I think they're going to kick themselves because I just can't help but think about the Galeno chance in the first leg in the first half off the post, and I don't know. I honestly, I seriously wouldn't have been surprised if Porto advanced. I know I was kind of mean, and in my opinion, it's justified about Arsenal. I didn't think they did much to really hurt Porto at all over the course of the 2 legs. And we'll see. We're going to talk about the draws. I'm going to be honest. It's going to be poetic justice when Bayern puts 7 past them over the next 2 legs and go through. I'm my fingers crossed. I hope that's what happens because I think this Arsenal team needs a slap. They need a reality check. I think it's going to come soon, to be honest, whether it's in the Champions League or whether it's with Man City in their next Premier League game. But we'll see. Arsenal are through. I think on paper they should be through, but The game's not played on paper, and it was played on the pitch, and it was a lot closer than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. So credit to Porto. I think they can hold their heads up high. And like John Lucas said, it's penalties. It's a lottery. It's nobody wants to lose that way. I used to hate winning that way, to be honest. It's not always the best team that wins, but that's sport and that's life sometimes. So,
real quick too, before we move, I'm interested. Was there any reaction in the Portuguese media to that little spat between Conceição and Arteta after the game? I saw that Conceição accused Arteta of insulting him and his family in Spanish. I was interested if there was any takes on that.
I did see that, but it seemed to have died really quickly after. Nothing really kind of came from it. But yeah, something about, I think it was more of like one of those figure of speech type things, like probably said something like, I don't know, I feel like son of a bitch, but the kid's son is something happened to his son. I think it was something like that. Right. But it wasn't necessarily a direct attack. But it's not the first time Arteta's gotten something like that accused of him, of being like kind of, I don't know, like a little over aggressive, over dramatic, kind of taking things out of context a bit. So that's just something to keep an eye on a young manager. But
I also saw Conceição was accused a few managers of insulting him in the past as well.
Oh yeah, because that's the Portuguese way with some of them. It's everybody did something wrong to them, except
I was just gonna say that, Jay.
And he's like the biggest. He's the worst when it comes to it in Portugal. There's very few managers I can put above him of being more accusatory or more, I don't know, outgoing and flagrant when it comes to the stuff like that. So I don't know. You kind of reap what you sow, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to Sergio Conceição and how he is as a manager. I think he's pretty smart tactically and stuff like that. But yeah, like you said, Jay, his personality is kind of a he's kind of a softie, I guess, for lack of any other better term. But yeah.
But one more thing I wanted to point out about this game. I don't know if you guys have probably seen it online, but there's been a lot of talk about Saka's penalty. I think it's a lot about one very small thing. But basically comparing to what he did for England versus what he did for Arsenal. And you can really see, I mean, again, I agree with this, but I think we're taking too much out of one move.
Yeah.
The confidence he had in the way he went about it was very much like, I know what I'm doing, I'm the man. And he's kind of like changed rather than in the Euro when he missed against Italy. Was very timid, very shy, and not necessarily ready to do it. So I just cool thing to mention. I don't know if you guys really take much stock in it, but I think it's a little bit of a turn for him, in my opinion.
I think that's the softest thing I've ever heard. He's at home.
I agree.
Significantly smaller stage as well.
Yeah. Well, good for Arsenal. That was the first time. That was the first time they've done anything of significance without Thierry Henry in the Champions League.
That was a pretty pushy.
I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did seem very tense to me. I don't know if you guys agreed. They seemed like they were shitting themselves the entire stadium.
And Rice, I remember having a nice big exhale. Actually, now that you say that, when he made his way back to his teammates in the line, that's funny.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that tie for Arsenal was nothing close to comfortable, but they got through at the end. Another game that went to penalties. We'll go there. Might as well. Atleti hosted Inter, where they were 2-1 winners in the 90 minutes and then obviously into extra time. And then they went all the way to PKs, where Oblak stood on his head, making, 2 PK saves, and then Lautaro's miss, so essentially only conceding twice from the 5 penalty shots. Obviously, everybody already knows that he's one of the world's greatest for the past decade, and he proved it again. Disappointing for the Italy coefficient, even though you guys are pretty locked in for that 5th spot. But still, I'm sure you would have wanted to see an Italian side go through despite it being Inter. But if you guys have thoughts on that game, Andrew G.
Yeah, let me go first. I have a lot to say about this game. I'm going to try to keep it short. I think Inter should be kind of ashamed of themselves. And I'm kind of looking at Inzaghi here. I thought he got his substitutions absolutely wrong. I think he thought that their defense was going to hold out. I mean, he was away from home, and I just didn't like the way Inter went about the game. I think this is as crash out result as you can get, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they were 1-0 winners in the home leg. They got the goal they needed in the second leg. It was 2-0 on aggregate, and they conceded the worst type of goal possible to concede when you have a 2-0 lead. They say it's the worst lead to have in football, and this was a prime example of it. I think the first goal that they conceded to Atletico Madrid was exactly the type of scrappy goal that Atletico needed to galvanize the squad. And from there, I think over the course of the game, it was too much for them, and they conceded the second. And obviously, it went to penalties. And like we were saying with the previous game, it's a lottery. But I think Inter just managed the game so poorly, and I'm kind of upset from an Italian perspective because I think this team's even better than the team that went to the final last year. I think if it's easy to say, but I think if Marcus Thuram was an Inter player last season, I think they might have won the final. I know I wasn't really impressed at all last year with Man City's performance. I remember thinking that Milan could have done one over on City. It was there for the taking. I think Inter this season in the Champions League in Europe reminded me a lot of Napoli of last season. Both teams were so far ahead of the league, not much to focus on in terms of their domestic league. I don't think, in my opinion, Atleti really had a chance on paper going into this, just with how strong Inter was. I mean, it's the first defeat Inter's had of 2024, and it comes on penalties to the hands of Atletico Madrid, and similarly to Napoli last year. I mean, they drew my Milan, and everybody was kind of laughing, saying that we were going to get destroyed. I mean, it was one point in the season where Napoli were second betting favorites to win the UCL, and they crashed out just like how Inter did this year. It's sad, I think, for the Serie A, and I think it's a little bit of a reality check. There was that whole advertising campaign made of Serie A is back. I think they should do that for this season because we're right back to the mediocrity and glazing over performances. I was pretty let down by Inter, not so much the other Italian teams because I think they were maybe punching above their weight, and I think there's a lot of looks that need to be taken in the mirror from an Italian perspective. But credit to Atletico Madrid. I think Atletico Madrid have a couple world-class players still, and that's who they lent on to win the game. Diego Simeone, I think, somehow, to me, feels like he's back. Can I say that? It almost feels like he's rejuvenated himself, and I know he's always had a really good relationship with the Atletico fans, and should this be his last season, it looks like he's going to have at least something to hang his hat on, something to hold his head up high. I know they got fucking smashed on the weekend, and we'll talk about that later this week. But in terms of the Champions League, I mean, we're going to talk about the draw too. They got a little favorable one. I think Atletico Madrid might be semifinalists pretty soon. So it was cool to see Simeone kind of in tears on the sideline after they got the job done. I don't think he really thought. Well, I'm sure he believed in his side, but I think when it was 2-0, I mean, Atletico did really well to drag themselves out of the fire.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you had to say. I want to shine a light on Memphis Depay though, because his performance in the second half when he came on, I thought he changed the game completely. I mean, Inter couldn't stop him at all, and that's not something you've been able to say about Inter's defense at all this season. They pretty much shut out every team they've played against. So I thought he was unbelievable. I mean, he was dragging defenders all over the place. He's the one that equalized, and then his penalty in the shootout was just otherworldly. I mean, that, like you said before, Ange, that was one of the best penalties I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was unstoppable. If Sommer went the right way, he was going to get nowhere close to that.
Yeah, he Atletico Madrid, like you said, Ange, Diego Simeone, I mean, it was an uncharacteristic performance, actually going out, flying, attacking, 23 shots. I mean, how many times have we talked about Atleti being one of the only teams in history to never even get a shot off in a game? And them out shooting Inter, who have been obviously playing really well in the league and everything in the UCL up until this point. So it's almost felt like, I mean, Atleti's performance in the league doesn't really merit a quarterfinal run into the Champions League, but you can't knock them how they've showed up in the games in this tournament, particularly this one. To believe in themselves at home. Obviously, going to Madrid in that stadium, it's a fortress, so it's not an easy atmosphere for the visiting team. But yeah, I think he got a lot of his tactics right to match up 1-for-1 against Inzaghi, as they tend to play a similar play style like we talked about in the first leg. And he really got everything right, in my opinion. I don't know if Jay and Pat have any other thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's just opposite of league form in this one, because it looks like probably, which I don't think should have been the case, but more of a prioritization of the Champions League for Atletico, because I think the league's probably done and dusted for them. It looks like they're going to finish probably below Bilbao if I remember correctly from looking at it. So this is their best chance at kind of having some sort of success this year. So fair play to them for going through with it. But yeah, like you guys said, a little bit disappointing for Inter. They definitely could have put all their eggs in this basket because they basically wrapped up the league already. So yeah, a little bit odd from that perspective. But yeah, surprise winners. But I agree with Andrew. I think they're going to be looking good for moving on in the next round as well.
I was going to say the same thing, Jason. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing, right? I mean, they're basically won the league, and then they come and play an Atletico team who's been pretty piss poor all season. They scrap wins just because of like the quality that they have. Not a fan of Simeone ball. I know you said he's back, but I mean, I don't really think there's anybody who is in love with his play style. Nate, you mentioned Oblak too, and I actually have been pretty critical of Oblak. I think he kind of fell off. So this is a huge performance for him. I mean, like he'll turn up and have his big games and stuff, and this is one of them. But it's good to see him kind of back and flourishing. I mean, they needed him in the shootout, and I want to talk about Alexis Sanchez. Alexis Sanchez's PK was atrocious. Probably one of the worst ones I've ever seen in my life, especially on like a keeper like Oblak. The stature, like. He was almost down the middle. It was like he couldn't pick a core. It was just garbage. But a couple of former United players in this, I got to tie it back somehow. So good to see, these guys making their run. But I mean, Atletico is always that team that is good for a deep run, always, regardless of how they do. I mean, like they'll play like shit in the league, come in third, fourth, just because it's La Liga. And then they'll go to the quarter semifinals in the Champions League. It's just kind of it's their stilo at this point. But yeah, pretty embarrassing from Inter. I'm kind of happy to see the team last year in the final, one of the best teams, get swiped. I'm an underdog guy, so it's good to see. Honestly, I'm excited to see the next tie with them. See how because they have a great chance to go to the semi now with their draw. So, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you shouted out Oblak too, because he's a goalkeeper I've always admired over the years. And I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. He has fallen off a little bit. He's definitely had a few injuries too over time, but he's always good to show up in the Champions League night and make big saves when he's needed, and he definitely did that in the shootout.
Can I say something too about the penalties? Because something that I was thinking, again, I tend to try to think of things when I watch these European games from a Serie A fan's perspective, because bias aside, I do always kind of root for the Italian teams. And yeah, I was just really let down by Inter's performance in the second half, and especially the penalties. I think Lautaro Martinez kind of got a little reality check. It was almost like you might not be that guy, pal. I know he's ripping up the Serie A, and a couple times I've said that he looks like a player who was having a Ballon d'Or type campaign, and I think it's just there's so many looks in the mirror that have to happen for a team like Inter and for a couple of the other teams at the top of the Serie A. I think there's a real lack of actual established world-class players. Earlier today, I was trying to think of names to present to everybody in the Serie A that are playing currently that are established world-class players, and I honestly can only think of 3, which I think is pretty bad. The names that I thought of were Dybala, Olivier Giroud, and me personally, I think Theo Hernandez is a world-class player as well. Maybe it's a little biased, but outside of that, I don't think there's any player in the Serie A that is established. There's certainly players that have the potential to become world-class. I think we have a handful of them, and I'm excited to see how they develop. But as of right now, I mean, guys like Çalhanoğlu, Barella.
I was going to say, you don't think Barella? Because that was one of the names that came to mind.
Are they there yet? I don't know. It's hard to judge. I mean, they win some domestic trophies, but on the European stage, I know they had one good Champions League run. I'm a little harsh. I think it takes a lot more than that. In games like this, they didn't show up. I mean, Barella had a guilty 1v1 in the second half that I think he probably could have done better with. And, I mean, Lautaro, I know it's never easy on penalties, and I don't think anybody should be judged just off a penalty kick. Right. But I struggle to think of times and moments in which Lautaro has taken a big stage by storm for Inter. So I don't know, just something else to think about. With maybe there's a lack of players that are actually world class, and I think in these big games, it's where it shows. I mean, if if Lautaro was truly world class and could, win a game on his own, he might have grabbed the goal in last year's Champions League final. Just things like this that I kind of think of when I watch these games from a Serie A perspective. So yeah, I was pretty let down. I think I'm gonna have even more depressing things to say in our next breakdown.
Yeah, just before we move to it, I just wanted to comment on that because, like we've said, Inter are pretty much done and dusted and wrapped up the league at this point, which means they have excellent quality, but it doesn't seem like they have the maturity to, because you see the three players that missed was Lautaro Martinez, obviously their focal man, and he wore the captain's armband on the day, and then you bring in Alexis Sanchez and Davy Klaassen with 15 minutes or less left in the game, so they're obviously penalty substitutions. Like, those are the guys coming in to take the pens, and then they both, all three of them, just can't keep the composure. So it seems like it's a lack of mentality rather than a lack of talent in that Inter squad, at least as far as this game went. And they should definitely be beating themselves up about it. But elsewhere, go ahead.
Davy Klaassen was shaking his head before he took his penalty. He knew he was going to miss before he even took it.
I knew he was going to miss too.
You can't have that attitude.
He looked like he already missed before he even put the ball down.
Oh yeah,
I was like,
it was almost like a "what am I doing here" kind of look that he had on his face. I remember seeing he looked up at the wall of fans behind the goal. That was terrible.
Yeah. And honestly, you know what? We already mentioned Depay's PK, but that PK going in first, I mean, dude, if you're a penalty taker and you just watched the guy who put you into extra time and then smash that PK, like, you're like, I can't hit it that good. Like, then you're worried about it. But elsewhere in Spain, we had another sorrow for the Italian league as Napoli got bounced by Barcelona 3-1, 4-2 on aggregate. A better display from Xavi's side that's been under a lot of criticism, but also they were playing another team that obviously our Italianos have been criticizing most weeks. So actually, I'll go ahead and just hand it over to you guys. Obviously, you've been pretty critical that Napoli have not been the Scudetto winning team, and they proved it again in this game against Barcelona. How did you feel about it?
Napoli, I think, are a little different. I wish I could give them some benefit of the doubt. Something that I thought was really interesting. I don't know if you guys caught Napoli owner Aurelio De Laurentiis' little interview he gave on CBS before the match. And he was kind of asked, you've sacked 2 coaches this season. It was kind of like what's going on was the question. And even he said, Napoli last season had an absolute kind of a flash in the pan season. I mean, they might be the best Serie A team I've ever seen in my life. I think any Serie A watcher would have a strong case for that, to say that. And even he had said it's going to be really hard for us to replicate that form. But with that being said, I mean, this Barcelona side have not done much this season, and even the side that they fielded, I feel like Napoli didn't take advantage of it at all. They came out so flat. And I know Barca was playing at home. They had some young blood in the team, and I think those young players wanted it way more than any of the Napoli players. At least that's how it looked. I mean, I was thinking to myself 5 minutes in, I mean, Fermin Lopez was everywhere, all over the pitch. He grabbed his goal, rightfully so. He celebrated like crazy. And I couldn't help but notice the difference in mentality almost. They asked De Laurentiis too before the game, because the rumor in Gazzetta dello Sport was that he offered the squad 10 million euros if they were to beat Barcelona on the night and get through to the next round. The reasoning, if you guys didn't see, was because Napoli would have qualified for the FIFA Club World Cup next season, which obviously would have been a very lucrative tournament for a side like Napoli to find their ways into. De Laurentiis said, actually, to the man who asked the question, he said, "Oh, you're right, but your sources are wrong." He said, "It's actually a lot more than 10 million euros. So he's always kind of a ball buster. We'll never know how much the offer actually was, if it was even on the table at all. But, I mean, they definitely didn't come out looking like they had an incentive on the line at all, in my opinion. And I think as soon as Osimhen missed that chance about 2 minutes in, he was one-on-one with Ter Stegen, and then Fermin Lopez scored 10 minutes later. I'm going to be honest, I had no hope for Napoli after that, even after the Rachmani goal went in to make it 2-1 on the night, and 3-2 on aggregate. I honestly didn't think they had a chance at all, and it was kind of a fall of it's kind of been a fall from grace for Napoli this season. Like I was saying, everyone last year thought that they were playing some of the best football in Europe. Pep Guardiola couldn't stop talking about them. But here we are. They've crashed out in the round of 16. Honestly, it's rightfully so. I'm surprised it wasn't worse on aggregate. I mean, I know there's been a little bit of a bump with Napoli with the new coaching changes, but I can't say I'm surprised with this one. It hurts, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was just disappointed from Napoli's performance overall in both legs. I mean, in the first leg, I thought it was off for the taking. I think they probably could have won that game, to be honest. I think
they looked really good.
Yeah, they played much better, and to respond in the second leg, I mean, we all know Barcelona have not been good at home this season at all this year, and I think it was all for the taking, and they just didn't play like that at all, regardless of ADL's $10 million offer or whatever it was that he threw out there for them. Yeah. But I thought it was pretty cool from Barcelona to field such, like, to see that the academy is still so strong. They're the first UCL team to play two 17-year-olds in their starting lineup. And, I mean, they've been so heavily reliant on Kubarsi and Lamine Yamal this season. It's kind of incredible. They've shown up in the big games, too. They certainly don't back down. They look like they belong there. And they definitely have the talent and quality to be there, too. So, yeah, I think it's pretty cool to, even though it sucks that a Napoli team is going out, it's nice to see a young Barcelona team going through it. A Barcelona team that hasn't gone to the quarterfinal of the Champions League since Messi left, which is pretty outrageous.
Wow, really? Holy shit.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool to see that it's the new era of Barcelona, these kids bringing them there, not some bought-off Levy buys that they called them now.
Yeah, it's not a 140 million euro Coutinho. I completely agree. I know I'm going to give Patrick a chance to talk because he was raving about Kubarsi, and he has been for the past couple weeks. But yeah, that was the thing that I particularly enjoyed when I watched the game was just the brightness of Yamal. I think I texted him. I think Yamal's the best young kid I've ever seen play. Young is in like under the age of 19. I mean, the kid is fucking unbelievable. Some of the things he can do with the ball at his feet. He had Mario Rui gasping for air in the first half. I don't know how close you guys watched the game. But Mario Rui was like, why the hell did you even pick me? He hasn't been picked for a Champions League game. He didn't get picked in the Champions League at all last year. They were playing Sergio, what's his name? Martin Oliveira. Same thing for all the European games. And yeah, Rui was like dogged in the first half. It was nuts.
Yeah, oh, God.
I guess we don't want to talk so bad.
Yeah.
I was going to segue from Andrew's point about Kubarsi. I mean, I don't watch Barca play too often, just because the times of the games are a little late in my day. But Kubarsi, I watched him play. He's unreal, dude. He's going to be one of the best defenders, center backs in the world. He's unreal. At 17 years old, it's criminal. It's disgusting to watch him play. So he was, I mean, if you could go out and lock up Osimhen in a Champions League game at 17 years old, like, I think you're destined for greatness at that point. But there's a couple players I want to highlight that didn't really look like themselves in this game. Di Lorenzo was getting cooked all game by Cancelo and Rafinha. I mean, it was insane to watch. And I was going to mention Mario Rui as well, getting absolutely dogged by Lamine. It was crazy, insane. I mean, we're talking Yamal, Lopez, and Kubarsi, like three players that are going to be Barca's talismans for the next couple years if nobody comes calling for them.
And crazy, we're not even talking about Pedri and Gavi at all.
Yeah, I was about to mention them too, like Gavi, Pedri as well. So now you leave the door open. Like, do you get rid of a player like De Jong, who's always circling the media with rumors? Right. Like, do you trust your academy? You never know with all the injuries they've been getting, but I mean, it's something really to think about. You know, they have Gundogan on a free. Obviously, I can't imagine that he'll be there next season, especially with Xavi leaving as well. So Barca looked really good. I was pretty shocked, actually. Scored two super fast goals. Kind of Napoli didn't know what to do with themselves, and then obviously Rahmani scored a pretty nice goal from center back, which was kind of crazy to watch him run all the way up the field. I was like, "Where's this guy going?" Then he scores, and I was like, "All right." It kind of ate my words per se. Lewa scores. It's just, I don't know. Napoli, like you guys talked about, they're just not the same team. They looked flat-footed all game. It was just bad to watch. But happy for Barca to at least go through a little bit, especially with the young fellas like you guys mentioned. So I'm pretty excited to see how they play, because like I said about Atletico, we could see a nice little derby in the next round here once they if they could beat both of their opponents, which looks like they potentially could do. So
yeah, I mean, I'm going to come to some rare Barcelona defense for me. I mean, I typically try to uh, throw some shade at them, but this is why you don't make drastic decisions about managers so quickly and let them have time. Because I think Xavi's done a great job, and it's a shame that he's already committed to leaving because everybody was up in arms that Barca need to be winning the league by 30 points every year. This is what they are. They're in a new transition period. They're getting some young kids in. They're missing their starting midfield. The midfield they wanted to start all year isn't going to be able to play. So, I mean, you got to cut them a little bit of slack there. They're still rebuilding, but they're getting good performances out of these young kids, and I think Xavi's done a really good job. They haven't lost since, I think, January 31st, so about a month and a half without a loss. They pretty much looks like they're going to finish second because Girona's tripped up a bit. So I think it's a great job from Xavi, and for this to be a crisis defined by Barca fans is ridiculous. And the fact they forced out a really good coach, and they're probably going to get in some scrub who's going to screw them over, like what happened with Valverde and all that stuff. They're going to go probably steal Girona's coach or something. It's going to be something stupid, and this club's going to collapse again. So I think they're really shooting themselves in the foot right now because I think Xavi has this team in a position to really become real European threats again for the next 5-6 years.
Yeah, I think I want to blend your point, Jay, with Pat's, and the fact that I think it may sound silly, but almost because Xavi knows there's no pressure on his job because he no longer has one at the end of the season, that he's now been able to just be like, you know what? I know where I came from, and I'm going to go to La Mesa, and I'm going to pull out academy products, and I'm going to put kids who bleed like red and blue, who bleed Barcelona, and they came on the field, and we saw all three of them ball out against Napoli in this game. And that actually begs the question, kind of wrap up our discussion on this game, to ask you guys, G and Ange, when I was watching Napoli play, it doesn't feel like any of them have that. None of them are bleeding Naples. Do you know what I mean? Like, you see these three young kids like absolutely putting everything on the line because they love the club. It's everything to them, and I don't feel like maybe Politano, maybe. But it just doesn't feel like anybody on the team is like Naples through and through. You know what I mean? That are fighting like tooth and nail for the badge. It doesn't feel like it's that way.
I was going to say Kamara the closest one to it.
Yeah.
He had a pretty decent game up and down the pitch the whole game he was running. So that would be. But Nate, to your point, I agree 100%. I mean, it just looks like they didn't want to be there. Yeah. Besides him, besides Kabara. Maybe Politano, like you said, just because he's on the score sheet. But even then,
I would actually argue that up until this season, the most Neapolitan one of them all was Osimhen.
Right.
But
right.
Because of everything that's happened with the club media and all that, I think his relationship has just changed. Mm-hmm. Not the same anymore.
But see, I think that comes more from the coach than it does from really the players or anything like that. Because I mean, crossing into another league, like if we look at Sporting, for example, Gyökeres is nowhere near from Lisbon, and he's 100% for
he's on board for the badge, yeah. Exactly,
and that's credit to the manager, through Ramarin. So I think Xavi is in a similar position with club legend. Nowhere near a club legend, but I mean, he's a younger, relatable player. He's a world-class player, one of the best players of all time. He's going to get that respect, and playing for that kind of team, he's going to get them to go. So I think he's got unbelievable advantage in that department. And when you've gone through 3 managers in one season for Napoli, it's hard to get up.
Who wants to fight?
Right.
Who wants to fight for the manager if you've had 3 different ones?
Yeah,
it's kind of like.
I think you raise a really good point, Nate. And I think again, like what upsets me even more about this Serie A crash out in this round is Napoli, to be honest, is the team in Serie A that I think acclimates their players the best. I mean, there's been so many players who have become absolute legends in Napoli that are not Neapolitan born. The likes of Mertens recently, Koulibaly, Marek Hamsik have all said how much they fell in love with Napoli. I mean, these are players that could have.
Yeah.
These are players that could have, well, besides Maradona, but you would have murdered my point. These are players that could have gone on to achieve so much at club level football earlier in their career, but they chose to spend the primes of their career in Naples. I think winning helps that a lot. that's pretty easy to say. Napoli haven't been doing a lot of winning this season.
Right.
Maybe some cracks were papered over last season, and it's all fun and games. I mean, every player that played for Napoli last season is going to be remembered forever. I mean,
Right.
it's only the third Scudetto they've ever won in their history, and we know how it goes. But yeah, it was. You raise a good point that it did look like there was a lack of fight, and it's too bad.
Yeah, so that being said, there was a double triumph in Spain over the Italian clubs. And the last game, I should say, of the UCL that we're going to talk about is an interesting one because it seems like one of these players has been tuning into the Sons of Pitches podcast because he's been sick of Patrick giving him hate week in, week out because Jadon Sancho, 3 minutes in, proved a bit of his worth with an excellent goal and then inspired Dortmund to go on, beat PSV. And go on to the next round, obviously rejuvenating a little bit of Dortmund's season as their league venture hasn't been what they probably would have wanted it to be. But probably an expected result from them. But how did you guys feel about the game overall?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was nice to see Sancho score again. 2 games in a row for him now. I think he might have maybe turned a corner a little bit. Who knows? It might remain to still be seen, but he's looking good. He's playing much better, I think. I also thought it was very, very nice to see Marco Reus on the score sheet.
Yeah.
He's a player I've always admired over the years. Such a great player. He's always been at Dortmund. He's always given it all for that shirt. Pretty cool too. Only Thomas Muller has scored more goals in the Champions League as a German player than him, which is kind of insane if you think about it. I mean, Marco Reus has been around forever, and to see that he's still doing it, I mean, it was such a cool finish, such a composed a goal he scored, something you would expect of a player his class too. But I think from a PSV perspective, they might be kicking themselves a little bit. I think they missed a lot of good chances in the first half. In the first leg, and even in this game, I think they had some chances. They were never really out of it, in my opinion, but Dortmund just scored at the right time. They scored early, and they scored in the end to kill it, and that's all you need in the Champions League. They used their experience, I think, overall, and that was the result in the end.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, as using their experience, because it was a pretty dead even game, pretty much. But I mean, Dortmund. Granted, it's a very new Dortmund team to what we were accustomed to, a lot of new players. But that was just a team that looked like they've been there before, versus PSV, who kind of looked like they were in a new territory. I think that's basically what it came down to.
Yeah, I think PSV will have some regrets too over the course of both legs. They missed some really, really big chances, especially in the home leg, and it's just sad. I mean, this PSV side are on pace to have the best season in the Eredivisie ever. I know I've said it a couple times. I have been tuning into their games recently. They're really fun to watch in the Eredivisie. So it was interesting to me when this draw happened. I thought if there was a team that they could pull one over in this round, it might have been Dortmund. But with that being said, Dortmund were probably the best team in the group stage. I mean, they were right there, one of the better performers. So I think they have a lot of momentum. I think they'll fancy themselves against Atletico Madrid, just like Atletico will fancy themselves against Dortmund. That one's going to be a fun tie, but yeah, no real surprises here. It was Dortmund on the night, but backed by the yellow wall. It's always a tough place to go. Not many teams get a result there, and they got the job done.
Yeah, unfortunately, PSV, it might have been a bit of complacency. Maybe they've just been cruising in the league, like you said, Ange. So maybe the head wasn't completely there when they traveled to Germany. But it is unfortunate for them. But Dortmund, I've loved Dortmund since that Aubameyang, Lewandowski, Mario Götze, Marco Reus. That team was unreal. So it's a fun club, and I like how they play football. So it's nice to see them go through. That about wraps up the game. So we'll get to the draw, as we've been hinting in a couple of these ties. Atletico Madrid does have Dortmund in the quarterfinal, along with PSG and having Barcelona. Real Madrid having Man City, and Arsenal hosting Bayern. That Arsenal-Bayern leg is going to be a fun one because I think the last 3 or 4 times Bayern have played Arsenal, it's been a 5-1 smashing. So Arsenal are either going to want to really hope they can end that streak, or Bayern are just going to have a hell of a time. But I'll just open it up to you guys. Which of these 4 are you most excited for? Any hot takes on what you think the results are going to be in these quarterfinal fixtures? What do you tell me something?
I'm excited for all these games. Honestly, I think there's something interesting and a great headline for all of them. I mean, just besides the fact of Arsenal getting smashed every time they play Bayern, it's Harry Kane, the Tottenham man, returning to Arsenal. So a little North London derby for him, which is awesome. Real Madrid and Man City. I mean, I think everybody had those two as the favorites going into the tournament this year. So to see them drawing against each other so early is always exciting. And also, it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how Real Madrid do. No Benzema against that, and Jude Bellingham obviously playing in England is going to be amazing, I think. PSG Barcelona is obviously the rematch of the remontada, which is always an interesting game if you're a footy nerd like us. And like you guys said, I think Atletico Madrid and Dortmund is just all to play for. I mean, that's probably the toughest one to call if there is a tough one to call, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the winners coming out of that side of the bracket with Madrid, City, Arsenal, and Bayern, I think it's just really strong. But it's great games to look forward to. Finally, because we've talked a lot of crap about the Champions League being kind of ass, and now we've finally getting into the real good games here. But yeah, interesting with PSG and Barcelona, because Barcelona is there for the first time without Messi. And PSG also back for the first time because they couldn't get there with Messi. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, I think the most exciting game is going to be that Real Madrid City, because it was great last year, those two legs. So we'll see how it goes this year.
Yeah, that Man City Real Madrid game is going to have a lot of weight to it. Obviously, Real Madrid having knocked out City, what was it, 2 years ago? And the vice versa happening last year. So it's 1-1 right now on their little kind of head-to-head bracket. So we're going to see who takes the edge this year. Anyone have a quick shout? You guys have a club that's already lined up to win at this point? Is anybody already that far ahead, or do you think it's still up and open?
Yeah, I'm just sticking with that side.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite yet to win. I don't want to go as far to say any of the big teams will win, because that's what I think makes knockout football so good. I think what is pretty cool, similar to last year, is we're going to have a pretty heavy underdog in the final, unless Arsenal go, which, I mean, I don't even know what I would do if Arsenal got to the Champions League final. I probably would have to stop showing up to this podcast, because it would mean I know absolutely nothing about football. But definitely excited for Real Madrid, Man City. I agree with you guys. This is kind of becoming a new modern European rivalry. I think this is the third or fourth time now they've met in the knockout stages of the Champions League. It's always a heavyweight contest. Yeah, I don't even know what to expect this time around. I think both teams are very, very different, honestly, from last season. So we'll see what happens. What I will say, though, is I really want to see how Dortmund get on. I think I've been very impressed with them for watching them play in the group stage, and they were the team that I kind of picked as my underdog going into the knockout stage. I like the draw for them. I mean, we'll see. I mean, going to Atletico Madrid is tough, but yeah, I don't know. What I will say, though, is I agree with Jay. I think the winner this year is probably going to come from that Madrid, Man City, Bayern, Arsenal side of the bracket. I don't know. What do you think, Patrick? You probably don't want to see anybody from that side win. Obviously, a team from Manchester, another team from the Premier League. Well, how do you feel?
You guys may call me crazy, but I don't. Everybody's kind of writing off Arsenal very early. But like the form that Bayern's been in has been a little hot. But I don't know, man. If Arsenal can somehow get through Bayern, then I mean, who's to say they can't? If City beats Madrid, who's to say that Arsenal can't beat City? Just like they battle them in the league. Who's to say, right? I'm actually turning to the other side of the bracket. I actually think if Barca can beat PSG, and they actually put a good performance in, I mean, it is a weak side. So all my buddies were laughing, saying, "Yeah, Barca paid the refs again to get on this side of the bracket. Now they paid UEFA." So it's pretty. I don't know, man. The way that they're playing, if the young kids can keep showing up and carrying, I mean, we might see Barca go to a final again. But I mean, obviously, regularly thinking, I would obviously say Real Madrid, City, Bayern, Arsenal, somewhere in there. But who's to say, Bayern's kind of been catching some fire. So who's to say they don't go out and wipe Arsenal and then show up like the old Bayern of the past and, smoke
Right.
Madrid or City and get back to the final. So I think the historical stake is what interests me the most. I'm going to have a fun time watching, and I think it's going to be blood for blood in the Dortmund-Madrid game. I think it's going to be just a shell-out battle.
Yeah, I think you broke down the Arsenal Bayern matchup really well because all jokes aside, this absolutely is not the Arsenal Bayern matchups that we used to watch when we were in high school. I mean, this is a far better Arsenal side. Those Arsenal sides arguably shouldn't even have gotten past the fucking group stages of the Champions League. I mean, they had almost nobody in those sides, and I mean, it says a lot when you host a Champions League knockout game and you get spanked 5-1 in your backyard. I don't expect that to happen. Look, I really wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal went through because, like Patrick said, Bayern is kind of there for the taking. And if you want a hot take, Nate, if we're gonna label it a hot take, I'm right there with Patrick. I actually think Barca is gonna knock out PSG. But it's gonna be a mad fun couple of games because there's a couple 17, 18-year-olds in both of these teams that are ready to stake their name on a European stage, and this might be the fixture to do it. I mean, guys like Zaire Emery for PSG, and obviously the likes of Kibarsi, Yamal, and Fermin Lopez. I mean, Fermin Lopez was probably only picked because of injuries, but who knows? I mean, sometimes you have to go with the hot hand. There's going to be some really, really good young talent on display in that one. So a lot of juicy fixtures. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'll just quickly note that I think the English title race I think is really going to hinder Arsenal and City in these games.
Yeah, you beat me.
But we'll see how it goes. I think they both definitely have the quality to do it. City with the experience to do it. We'll see how it plays out though.
Joe, to tackle your point really quick, if you guys don't know, my brother's an Arsenal fan, newly found love for Henry and the Gunners. So he was reading me the possible fixtures for April, and he was like, "Dude, either everybody's gonna get hurt, or he doesn't know what they're gonna do." But they have some insane legs for this the month coming up. Like I think you answered it perfectly. I mean, I don't know if they're going to be able to withstand it with their first, real kind of season. I mean, obviously they gave away the lead last Christmas, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can hold up truly. And I was also looking at and you mentioned the 10-2, we're talking Mustafi at center back, like Monreal at left back, Ramsey playing center mid. Like they were not good
teams.
Yeah, those are the teams that United would play second, go third, and then the next year everybody would be hurt and they field a shitty lineup and they get spanked out of every group stage game.
Right.
Basically, how I look at these legs. So it'll be cool to see a strong Arsenal team playing again in the Champions League.
Yeah, you kind of beat me to the punch, Jay. I'm with the City Arsenal game coming March 31st. That comes right before these Champions League fixtures kick off. I think there could be a mental thing that happens on the result of that fixture. I mean, if Arsenal do an upsetting win at the Etihad, that could take a lot of air out of City's tank, and they could go into that Real Madrid game with their heads kind of low, and then next thing you know, they drop a result in Madrid, and they're just not ready to move to the semifinals, and then Arsenal come out hot out of that game and beat Bayern, or vice versa. So I think that game's going to have huge implications on both that side of the bracket of the Champions League as well as the Premier League title. And I want to say something else too about the Barcelona PSG game. I think a funny little idea to think about is the fact that obviously PSG's talisman Mbappe is leaving in the summer, and a lot of arrows point to Madrid. And if Mbappe is a Madrista at heart, like he likes to say he is, he's going to go to Camp Nou and he's going to try to ball out. And if he could put 3 past Barcelona in Camp Nou, and that could derail their whole dreams of the UCL. So I think that's going to be a funny little one to watch, because I feel like he's going to put everything on the table if he's as much of a Real Madrid fan as he says he is.
And it won't be the first time that he balls out. I mean, I think, if I remember correctly, I think he had a hat trick at the Camp Nou a couple of seasons ago in the Champions League. So yeah, it'd be fun if he kind of puts some wins in his sails for a hatred of Barcelona. It could be a nice little precursor to future El Clasicos, but we'll see.
They already have the edit made too with him with a signature under if you score the hat trick. You already know they have him waiting in a folder.
For sure.
Scores a hat trick, pulls up his short, says "a la Madrid" on it or something.
Yeah, it's gonna be taking off his jersey like this with Madrid
crazy.
one.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be terrible. I'm
That'd
already
be
waiting
so
for
crazy.
it.
That'd be so crazy.
Craziest transfer announcement.
Yeah, but we've been dogging the UCL a little bit, but we're definitely excited for the quarterfinal. A lot of big fixtures, big teams in it. So it'll be much more exciting than it's been. But that being said, we'll move to the Europa League where we all have a stake or have had a stake. Maybe some of us not anymore. But we'll get to that. We'll start one of the earliest games on Thursday. Jay, tell us about your Benfica and narrowly beating Rangers in Scotland to progress to the next round.
Yeah, bit of a cagey affair, I'd say. Both teams looked a bit nervous on kind of how to progress. But I think overall, Benfica played well. They put out a fairly strong lineup. I think close to what would be their best lineup in general. But a little bit disappointing to see Marcos Leonardo kind of put a dud out there, do pretty much nothing in his first Europa League start. But overall, solid performance, enough to get through, and I'll take it every day. So yeah, no real complaints.
Yeah, interesting for me that Marcus Leonard did not have the best first half, gets substituted at halftime, but then for Kasper Tengstedt, who hasn't been having good games, and Artur Cabral continues to ride pine under Roger Schmidt. My criticisms of him keep going, but obviously Benfica get the results, so I guess I can't say too much about it. But I was a little disappointed in Rangers. I thought they were going to put on a better performance. They had moments of what I think they could do, but they're mostly on the back foot. I think Benfica had them on the heels for a lot of the game, even though Benfica weren't even at their best either. It was, like you said, Jay, a bit cagey in my opinion.
I'll definitely shout out Travanere, though. I thought he was fantastic for them all game. Really all tie between both games. I think he really made it a struggle for anyone on that left side to really contribute anything of note.
I actually have something to say, shockingly enough, about Benfica Rangers. Such an odd tie for me to speak up in. But as Ange knows, I have a little stake in the Scottish Prem here. So I did watch the first and second leg because I just wanted to see how Benfica was going to do about with a different team, like a team like Rangers, who is second in their league, neck and neck with Celtic right now. So I thought Sutar had an absolute shocking first leg. He comes back and puts on a great performance in the second leg, which is awesome. And Jason Tavernier plays like that almost every single game. 95% of his games, he's like lights out, unreal. That's why he's their captain.
He's been great.
He's disgusting. He plays like that every game.
I was really impressed with him.
Lawrence and Dessers were super quiet this game. Lawrence is usually like the one who's starting all their attacks. He's like really good at the 10, but I don't know. This game, João Neves kind of had his way with the with the Rangers midfield. Jay, I was gonna ask you too. Do you think like Leonardo's not fit yet because he's only been playing like halves of football? It seems like like he'll get subbed on for 45 minutes, score. Then he'll get subbed on again, score. They start on this game. He only plays 46 minutes, 45. He gets subbed off again. Do you think it's like a fitness thing, or do you think Schmitz just has three strikers he wants to play around? What do you think is kind of going on with that?
So I think it's two parts. I think he came in after not playing for a bit because playing the Brazilian league, the leagues were off. So he kind of came in at a weird time where he wasn't necessarily fit. But I think that excuse is out the window now, and I think as of late it's just been poor squad management from Roger Schmidt. Because I think there was a point where he was the most informed striker, where he was scoring every game coming in. I think he was averaging like 2 goals per 90 minutes in his first 2 months here. But then he really only got this start after he went on a cold streak and stopped really scoring and contributing like that. So I think it's just really gross mismanagement of the striker position because at one point, all three of these strikers were in really good form. And for some reason, they both stopped. All three of them stopped playing when didn't get the correct opportunities when they were at the peak of their form. So I think it was really a masterclass on how to kill a striker's form from Roger Schmidt. But I don't see any excuse for it now.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Roger Schmidt literally put them on ice. I don't know
Yeah,
if he
for
was
sure.
trying to preserve them, but that didn't go well at all, in my opinion. But nonetheless, Benfica are through, which is the result that they would have wanted regardless. So you're just going to have to take it with a grain of salt and then look forward to the next
Yep.
game, which we'll get to when we talk about the draw. But running down the list, we do have another member of our crew here with a good result for them. Probably the fixture might have been done and dusted after leg one, but still you want to see your team really duke it out and play well. And Milan did just that with a 3-1 victory at Slavia Prague. Ange, go ahead and run me through that game where we had a little masterclass from Rafael Leao.
Yeah, that we did. And before I break down Milan's performance, I wanna speak from a Prague perspective. I feel really bad for Slavia Prague. I mean, 2 red cards in both legs. I mean, that sucks. Do I think there are red cards? Probably, but I mean, both come so early in both games. I mean, the first one. Hold on, let me look now because I'm curious. But I know in the second leg, I mean, the red card came on the 20th minute. I mean, it was from their captain as well. I mean, it just sucks. I think they might have given us a much harder game. Yeah, the first leg it was the 26th minute. So I mean, I thought both games were kind of dead. Like right after that, it was kind of boring to watch after that. Like I know there was a lot of goals scored, and there was a little bit of sweating to do in the first leg when Slavia Prague kind of dragged themselves back into it. But yeah, I just thought it really hindered the football on display because I think we might have had a tough time with Slavia Prague. It's always tough going to Prague and play these teams from the Czech Republic. There's been some big teams that have gone there and not gotten results. So it was nice to see Milan be on the favorable side of a red card decision, but the football fan that I am, I honestly like it sucks. I almost didn't even want to watch the rest of the second leg, to be honest. I think it kind of killed the game. It took all the air out of the stadium. But from a Milan perspective, I mean, just more great performances from our best players this season. It was Pulisic, Leao, and Loftus-Cheek with goals. Pulisic has been on fire. Leao is finally starting to silence demons when it comes to him scoring. He scored his goal this season, one of the better goals he scored in his career. It was pretty funny, the interview he gave after. He's like, well, I tried in training all the time, and I had the chance to do it in the game, and it came off. So nice. He's playing with a smile again. He's playing with confidence. It's 5 wins now in a row. You'll hear about the win on the weekend in the podcast that comes later this week. But after this game, it was 4 wins in a row for Milan. So we're in good form. We'll have to talk about the draw later. But it's nice. I think we have a lot of momentum going into the next round. I just wish we could have had a little more of a challenge. I hope we don't get too complacent with putting 7 past 10-man Slavia Prague twice. That's really my only concern. But other than that, I think we handled business well. Tamori made his first start in a long time in this game. He played a half of football, so that was good. He ended up starting on the weekend, which, again, we'll talk about later in the week. So, yeah, it was good. Pioli's rotating the squad well. The only thing that was a little concerning is Mike Magnan came off injured. In this game, he's had a track record of injuries, and I was a little worried that it was going to be something that would hinder the rest of our season, but he did come back and start in the next game. So other than that, I really don't have anything else to say about Milan. It was a pretty cut and dry couple of results, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would say is I was actually kind of disappointed with the decisions of the red cards. I thought they were both a little soft.
Yeah, it was so early in the game, too. It just sucked.
It just killed
the
both sides.
occasion.
Like you said, I really thought Slavia Prague would have offered a lot more. They showed that in the first 20 minutes of both legs, I thought, and they were just undone by the red cards.
And I think they topped their group in the Europa League as well, right? If I remember correctly. So this was a team that, I mean, definitely had momentum going into this tie. Yeah, they topped their group with Roma. I think they beat Roma in Rome. No, so
yeah, we struggled against them.
So I don't know. I feel bad for them. They probably would have. I don't know how much they would have fancied themselves against a team like Milan, but at least they got 3 goals. They can kind of hold their heads up high because they performed pretty well with having only 10 guys.
Yeah, and I'll ask you real quick. Do you think this is the best period in Milan season? Because from the outside, it looks like you finally got pretty close to your full strength team. I mean, no real injuries, and you're finally getting real. Because I think Leao started really slow this season, and he seems like he's kind of full force now. Now you've got pretty much all your center back choices back too.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I hope it's not the best point in our season because that means the season will have sucked, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of tough games coming up, actually. in April. I know the second leg with Roma is followed by a game against Inter and a game away to Juventus. And I think I was trying to do the math in my head. I think as it stands, if Milan and Inter matched the results, I think Inter could win the Scudetto in the Derby della Madonnina, which would be really bad, to be honest, because not only would they beat us to the second star on the badge, that's been kind of a battle going on in the Serie A, but I'm going to talk about that later in the week. Yeah, I think you raise a good point. The squad's getting healthy at the right time, and I think we're starting to play our best football at the right time. I think Pioli still has a lot of pressure, in my opinion, because now he has decisions to make. He has a deeper squad. He actually has to pick players. I think these 11s have kind of been picking themselves, especially when he was forced to play youth. Like, I don't even really give him much credit. It's not like he was being a genius when he played a 15-year-old Francesco Camarda. He did it because he had no choice, you know? So we'll see. I think the defense has been pretty good, but it's always tough when you're chopping and changing center back duos, especially in big games. So I think while the squad is growing, I think it might be a little more of a headache. We are competing on two fronts, even though the Serie A is kind of wrapped up. It's very clear that we're not going to win it. So, yeah, you raise a good point. I mean, we're definitely getting healthy at the right time. So I've been in good spirits.
Yeah, I think to wrap that up, I think you're right, Jay. It's close because you have the midfield trio who's plug and play a little bit. You probably would say, Angie, you probably have 5 starters for those 3 positions, and they have all done well. You got both wingers absolutely crushing it. Giroud is always a presence, and then obviously with Florenzi coming back in the team, we talked about that performance that he had 2 weeks ago, was it now? So Milan looked great going down the flanks and through the middle, so it should be only up for here, hopefully. Obviously, a couple of strong fixtures coming. A couple more fun fixtures we'll talk about briefly. Villarreal were on the edge of pulling one out of the hat, which would have been absolutely insane. The first leg, if you didn't know, was 4-0 to Marseille, and we came back to Spain, and Villarreal went up 3-0. The 85th minute, they were still pegging for more, and then Klaus took all the gas out of that tank with a goal late on in extra time to make it 3-1 and 5-3 on aggregate. So there was just no hope in the dying breaths of the game after that one. But that was an interesting one. G, I know you had some thoughts. I'll let you go on for a little bit about that one.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun to watch. I mean, the desire that Villarreal showed in this game was incredible. I mean, I've seen them play a few times this season in La Liga, and they definitely have not shown that type of character at all. And to show up like that, it was pretty cool, too, because, I mean, Marcelinho, their coach, was Lyon's coach at the beginning of the season, who was sacked because they were doing, or Marseille's coach, excuse me, because they were doing so poorly with him. And Gasset hadn't lost up to this point and they got smoked. I mean, Villarreal played so good for 85 minutes of this game. I really thought they were going to go and find that 4th goal, and they got caught on the break. Aubameyang used that classic vintage pace of his, beat them in behind, and he found Klaus at the back post to just kill the tie and kill the game. And I think there was so much relief on the Marseille bench and all the players and the fans in the stands because, I mean, they were really up against it for 90 minutes. I really thought Villarreal were going to pull it off. I mean, I've never seen a 4-goal comeback like that before. It would have been pretty historic, and it was a lot of fun to watch for sure.
I think you summed it up well, and I wanted to say, I mean, Marseille have kind of done a 180 on their season. I mean, this was a team, I was looking at the results earlier before the podcast. They didn't win in their first 7 games to start 2024. They made a coaching change, and I think they are kind of through. And I mean, about a month and a half ago, I don't think they would have thought they had any chance against Villarreal. But to score 5, Aubameyang is on some of the best form of his career. So we'll see. I know they have to play Benfica pretty soon now in the Europa League. I don't know how confident Jay is, but it might be a tall task. We'll see.
Yeah, and real quick too, before we move, like, we can't forget Gasset is none other than the guy who was sacked for Ivory Coast 2 games into the AFCON. So he's got his own reputation on the line here too.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of management movement that has raised eyebrows, but then continue to just create these insane storylines. So it's been lovely for the football neutrals and nerds like us. But another fantastic game to watch. Goals galore, excellent performances. from none other than Kudus and Bowen. West Ham absolutely smoked Freiburg after losing 1-0 in Germany. Obviously, 1-0 is a small scoreline, so it was all to play for, but they made sure there was no question marks at the end of this game. I know Ange has had his question marks about David Moyes, and we've probably come to the consensus that the team is doing a lot of the talking, but you can't knock him. He's the one putting the 11 out there. He's the one that's setting the tactics. But boy, are some of these boys balling. And I'll let you go, Ange, because I know Kudus has been on your radar. You've been hitting the group chat for a couple seasons now, especially with his performances in Eredivisie. But yeah, take us through this one.
Yeah, you're right. I tried to watch this game, and particularly Kudus, because, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what it is, but ever since I watched him play for Ajax and a couple times for Ghana, I just thought he was something special. I mean, there's not too many players who prefer playing in midfield that can pick up a ball and run with the pace that he did for the goal he scored. He's had a couple iconic celebrations. He's really enjoying his time at West Ham, so I can't help but smile every time I see him do well. He was absolutely man of the match on the night. He's been on fire. He's been propelling West Ham forward, and similar to Marseille, I mean, they've kind of turned their season around. I know I was kind of tough on them. They had a lot of injuries, and I'm still reluctant to give David Moyes his credit. I think I have no choice but to not give him credit now because I've just dragged myself so far up Schitt's Creek with that one. So it is what it is. But cool to see West Ham win 5-0. This was actually a really, really big result for the UEFA coefficient. I don't know if you guys saw, but before the game, I think Germany had about an 80% chance to have a fifth spot. In the Premier League only had a 20% chance. This flipped it right around on its head. I mean, England have almost a 90% chance now, and it's all because West Ham were able to beat a German opponent who had the lead going into the game. I mean, they won 1-0 at home. It's obviously was always going to be tough to go away to West Ham and win, but this was a massive result, not only for West Ham's season, but for all of the Premier League. So hats off to them. It seems like if they don't win the Europa League, they might be able to create a own spot for themselves European-wise in the Premier League with this result. So really good night for West Ham.
Yeah, it was definitely one to watch, and I think they're going to be ones to watch in this tournament too if they can continue this kind of form, keep these players healthy and rolling. So we'll get to that later when we talk the draw. But I guess that will bring us back to Italy, where my Sporting unfortunately did lose to Atalanta 2-1. I think that the fixture overall tactically was interesting to watch. I think the managers set the teams up pretty similarly, so it was an interesting one to kind of dissect. But the football played wasn't probably the most exciting, at least for my Sporting. Atalanta had some moments of brilliance, but in this game, in my opinion, while Atalanta looked great, they also just happened to capitalize on just two really poor lapses in concentration from the Sporting defense. We just looked lackluster. Despite when we scored the first goal, Bot unfortunately gets hurt when he scores it. We actually looked on the front foot. I was actually pretty confident that one went in. I thought we might be able to grab another. But then Lookman scored right before halftime, and then after the break, it was pretty much nothing going Sporting's way at all, and Atalanta looked solid. So they're a strong team. I know you guys might have a couple words about this game. Atalanta they're a disciplined side, in my opinion. I think they have a game style. They take it down, some talented players, and some dangerous forwards. But it was disappointing to say the least. But my eyes are on the league now.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell whether or not Sporting's eyes were on the league during this couple of games against Atalanta. This was actually the game that I watched the closest on Thursday. It was the game I was the most excited for. It's hard not to be an Atalanta supporter if you're a Serie A fan, just because somebody like myself who's been watching the league for a decade, almost 2 decades now, has seen them come from Serie B into European competition. So to see them play teams like Sporting, it's still almost surreal. And I was pretty pleased. I mean, especially from a Serie A perspective. I mean, the Sporting team have been on absolute fire. I think they marshaled Gyökeres pretty well. But what stood out to me the most was Gianluca Scamacca. 2 goals in both legs. I mean, he is not the player I would have picked to score 2 goals in this tie at all. I mean, he didn't even get into the Italy squad. He's been criticized a lot, especially from Luciano Spalletti and even Gasperini, who wasn't picking him and was choosing De Ketelaere to play striker over him because he was saying that he doesn't contribute much to the team at all. Like, he doesn't run off the ball. He doesn't press. He doesn't try to win the ball back. So good for his season to get a couple of goals, but I was particularly surprised. And like you said, Nate, I mean, Atalanta kind of hit Sporting in the mouth. It was a goal right after the It was right into the second half, not right at the end. I think you misspoke at the beginning, but it was a minute. I mean, it was a minute into the second half, and I think up until that point, it was really ideal scenario for Sporting. I mean, they got the away goal. I know they don't count for anything, but they had a lead on the tie, and I don't know. Did you think that they kind of took the foot off the gas, or was it just kind of they got punched in the mouth by Atalanta, and Atalanta just used the momentum from the Lookman goal to kick on, get a second, and then the tie was kind of dead after that? What did you think?
It's interesting because the side wasn't like heavily rotated or anything. I mean, St. Just makes another appearance, but it's just because he's been injured. He would probably potentially have a starting place, if not at least rotated often. I mean, the only thing that I can see tactically is there's something interesting that Ruben Amorim does, which is it's unique to Sporting, and it's something that I might mention now and you guys might take a closer look at. But the way we have our fullbacks, on each side we have a defensive fullback and a more attacking fullback. And typically when we play these games, Ruben Amorim he likes to dissect the other team, pick which side that he thinks is the weakest, play our attacking fullback on that side, and then the defensive one on the other side. In this game, he played both defensive fullbacks on this side, so we didn't have as much creativity going forward on the width. So we were playing really, really centrally, which is actually why we get that goal from Gyökeres and Pote. It was a super central play. They was just driving up the middle, a nice little 1-2 layoff. But if you watch that game back, we just get no width, and then he tries to make up for it, but then substitutes both defensive fullbacks for the attacking fullbacks, and then we start to break down defensively. So it was actually an interesting one from obviously my point of view, as I know my club in and out. But yeah, mentality wise, maybe we're just worried about the league. It's something that when it comes to Portuguese media, it's probably on a lot of these players' minds because we get criticized about the most, especially with our drought that recently ended. The league is always something that they talk about when it comes to Sporting. So that might just be the focal point, getting the league done. And then we weren't as excited or as motivated to get this one done. But I mean, if we were going to go out, I think there are significantly worse sides to go out to. I'm not embarrassed at all to lose to Atalanta. They're an excellent team. Like you mentioned, they've been growing. I've seen them in the Serie A play well. So I'm not disappointed as much as I wish we played a little bit better, but that's about all I have feelings for that one.
I wanted to say you gave really good insight about the formation selection and the tactics, because something that I was kind of confused at, and I only remember now because you brought it up, I was a little surprised to not see Jenny Catamo picked. I thought he was one of the better players in the first leg. I think it was kind of weird. Maybe the game plan was to snatch a goal and play defensive. Yeah. And, you could argue that Amorim actually got the game plan right in the first half, and then it just kind of slipped away from them. So, I mean, at this point, we're just kind of trying to hypothesize. But I actually was a little confused with the selection.
I mean, Andrew, I think you hit it right. I think the game plan was see if they can score a goal and hit defensively. But I think he made one crucial error, which was not playing Coates. I know he's been in and out of the team with some injuries recently, but I think that leadership that he has is invaluable. You have a back line that doesn't play too often together. I mean, I don't think the three of them have played together in over a year. And they're all young to begin with, kind of raw players. So you're probably a bit more polished as of late with more game time. But I think not having that leader on the team and then also losing Pedro Gonçalves early just really ruined any chance of that game plan working. And I noticed the same thing, Nate, about the defensive and attacking fullbacks, but playing both of them, I think, is always just a bad move. Right. No matter what, I think you just got to pick one to go attacking wise and kind of force your attack on that side. But it was a case of picking your battles. This team isn't built to compete for a treble, which they currently were. Right. So I think this is probably the hardest of the three to win in your position you're in. So probably the easiest one to kind of throw to the side and focus on the cup in the league, which is probably the best thing for them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate analysis. I think Coates being in this time would have been instrumental, especially if the game plan, obviously we're just guessing, but if the game plan was to get one and be defensive, you need someone who's keeping everybody in check mentally. And that's where we went wrong in the second half. Is Atalanta had the focus. They had that, within those 45 seconds into the second half.
You don't score those Coates on the
right, because they're just not focused. Nobody's keeping him accountable, especially no Antonio Dan, who has his own lapses in judgment, but at least he's an experienced player. So there's a lot of youth on the field, which I love to see always, but you always need a little sprinkle of experience. But then we'll move to another fun little game. This one had us on the edge of our seat to the very last minute. Bayer Leverkusen managed to keep their unbeaten season alive with a dramatic finish. I know you guys will agree with me. I got to give big ups to Karabakh, who over the 2 legs have just silenced anyone that might say that they're not anywhere near the level, because for some reason they were pulling out of the bag against what is debatably one of the best teams in Europe, at least how form is going in the league. And they really were showing Xabi Alonso that he can make mistakes and that he's human and he's gonna make mistakes. But he managed to get the substitutions right. Patrick Schick coming on and inspiring with a brace. Grimaldo coming on, getting 2 assists. So it was a tactical masterpiece as far as Xabi Alonso made his substitutions. But all credit to Karabakh for opening that game hot. But tell me how you guys felt about this one. I know we were all talking about it in the group chat.
Yeah, I really thought that the undefeated streak was going to be gone. I mean, I thought it was going to be gone after the first leg, and Schick managed to pull it out of the fire after that one, and he did it again in the second leg. But I think my favorite part of this whole game was Anthony Taylor sending off the Karabakh player. They went to VAR, and after we gave the yellow card, he canceled the yellow card, and the player went to high five Anthony Taylor because he thought he was going to give him nothing. And then Anthony Taylor proceeded to send him right off, and he just turned around and walked off like he couldn't believe what was happening. I thought it was so funny. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in a game. I've never seen a player ever try to high five a referee. So I thought that was just awesome.
Yeah, it kind of sucked, to be honest. I actually hated this game, everything about it. It was spoiled. I thought Karabakh honestly deserved to go through. I was pretty pissed when Schick scored twice. I wasn't excited at all. I didn't care that their undefeated season is going to go on, to be honest, because this would have been such an epic, classic European tale if little Karabakh had given Leverkusen their only loss on the season and just bounced them from any contention of winning a treble this season. I mean, not only did they score first at Leverkusen, they scored a second after being down a man. I mean, it was nuts. It was 4-2 on aggregate in favor of Karabakh. But, I mean, yeah, I guess credit to Xabi Alonso and what he's built. I mean, they're almost mentality monsters, if you will. That's what the term that we like to throw around now, thanks to Jurgen Klopp. So good for them, I guess. I mean, you scrape past a team that you should have blasted. Obviously, the game's not played on paper, like I keep saying, but I don't know. Honestly, I wasn't particularly amused at all by the late goals. I was more upset, but I'm kind of like everybody where I like to root for the underdogs if it's not an Italian team playing. So
yeah, I mean, to me, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say it's a time to question Xabi Alonso a bit. I'm being very, very picky on this one, but it almost seems like that their main starting 11 is really all they have. And they were perfectly picked to fit this team and this system. And when they try to stray away from it and rotate, they really run into issues. But that main core of players is so good that you can sub them on in the second half. Grimaldo comes in, 2 assists right away. Same thing, Patrick Schick, 2 goals off the bench. So it's they're fantastic, but I almost feel like it's the fit of that main group of players is a bit more important than the system itself being so great.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised because the lineup that Xabi Alonso puts out isn't overly weak by any means, but yeah, he does pull a couple punches, which it's almost like I don't want him to have a big head. You got to make sure you respect who you're playing. Karabakh gave you a run for your money last time. Yeah, you're playing away and all that, but you still have to respect it, and he should be fighting for a treble. I mean, the way they're proceeding in the league, you should be giving it your all. So I think it was a little taking him down to reality, make sure he knows that he needs to field a strong team. He needs to give everybody the respect they deserve. But yeah, Ange, I do agree. It would have been kind of fun to see Karabakh in the quarterfinals. I don't know how many times we would ever see that in the Europa League. But I think they shouldn't walk out of this tournament with their heads held high for sure. They made a great account of themselves, especially in this fixture. Two more games, sorry, we'll talk about. We're going to bring it over to you. Unfortunately, you did lose on the day, but of course, with the 4-0 win in Italy, Roma secured the next round of the Champions League. Obviously, you were probably going in this fixture pretty comfortable. A couple of rotations, which is obviously nice to see some of the kids get in there and play half decent, hold Brighton, who are by no means a poor side, to only 1-0 in England. But walk us through that one quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see a rotated side. I mean, we haven't really had the chance to do that yet in the De Rossi era, I think. They've all been pretty crucial matches in terms of picking up points, so it was nice for us to get some players some rest. It was nice. It was especially nice to see Baldanzi get his first start because he really hasn't been able to shine at all, really, because, I mean, Dybala has just been unbelievable as of late. But other than that, it was cool to see Danny Welbeck score a nice goal. But Brighton never really threatened us through this game. I never thought we were ever in threat. I mean, yeah, they scored early. Did I think about it for a second? Maybe they could come back, but I mean, I never really felt like they were going to score a second goal. Villar made a couple saves, but they were saves I always expected him to make. Other than that, though, the only real standout I have is Spinazzola's been quietly one of our best performers since De Rossi took over. He's kind of rekindling his form since the Euro 2020 and his Achilles injury. So it's been nice to see him come back and play so well recently. I thought he was our best player by far, and he was kind of involved in everything we had going forward, even though it wasn't much in the game. But other than that, yeah, it's nice to see us go through the quarterfinal. Obviously, we'll have a lot more to say when we talk about the draw.
Yeah, it does set us up for some fun. But yeah, definitely Villar continuing his fine form in net. You guys had a nice little break in the season, obviously sitting comfortable 4-0 on aggregate going into this game. So you were able to rest some key players so you can focus on the Serie A and keep getting that coefficient to get that 5th place in the Champions League. Finally, another thrashing, nothing too surprising. They put 11 past them on aggregate. Liverpool smoked Sparta Prague. A couple fun goals in this one. Salah with a hat-trick of assists as well as a goal to his own name. Nothing too surprising about this game. Pretty straightforward. I don't know if anybody has any quick little thoughts about this one before we move to the draw.
I mean, it was over after 14 minutes, so
yeah, that was insane.
Not much else to say.
Well, it was over after the first leg, but I think what sucks from a Prague perspective and a Czech Republic's perspective is I remember looking at the coefficient. I think the Czech Republic are like 6th in the ranking. I mean, they're ahead of a couple nations that you'd expect them to be below in the coefficient ranking. So that kind of sucks for them to have gone and conceded. Let me do the math: 18 goals over 2 legs respectively, so that kind of sucks for them, but I'm not sure what it does for their coefficient. But I mean, when you draw AC Milan and Liverpool, 2 of the top 3 most storied European clubs, in my opinion, it's always going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I think definitely a sign that they're probably going to rotate throughout this entire tournament, and they're still going to be one of the best teams there and still be ridiculous. So, no breaks for us in the Europa League against Liverpool.
Nope.
Yeah, it's unreal. I mean, it's funny too because Sparta Prague are typically such a disciplined side. It's not an easy team to typically break down and to bag 4 in 14 minutes. It was unreal. I remember I hadn't even got a chance to settle down and put that game on. I was watching a couple of the other ones and my phone was just blowing up every couple minutes with a goal. But that'll bring us to the draw. Jay's Benfica has an interesting lineup. I'm not sure how confident you are, Jay, but Marseille is going to be a difficult matchup. Obviously, they battered in the first 4-0 against, I'm drawing a blank, Villarreal. And they almost lost it. So obviously there's room for them to improve, but also they can pull a good one out of the hat. So tell me real quickly how you feel about that draw.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think a little bit dangerous because I think it's probably who everybody was looking forward to drawing, probably who everybody believes is the weakest remaining team. That's also going to be very dangerous to overlook them. But it really all comes down to whether we are in form or not during these legs. Because I think it's the same thing that happened last year with the Inter games. I think they caught us at the worst time of the season, and right away went down. But yeah, I still won't say I'm confident we'll get through it, but I like it.
Can I say something kind of funny?
Yeah,
I think it's funny. I think it's pretty funny that you said that Marseille were the team that everybody wanted to draw. I think they're only the worst team to draw for you because, respectively, I think Benfica is actually the team that everybody would have wanted to draw, and you can't obviously draw yourself, in my opinion.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think it's like pretty evenly matched, to be honest. I wanted Benfica or Marseille. I'm going to be 100% honest.
Yeah. But I still mean, it all depends on form, right? Because I think at our right. best, we're up there with
but at your worst, you've gotten killed by a couple teams that are good in the Portuguese league. So that was just something I wanted to highlight.
Right now, I think you can easily say you got a good chance, but it shouldn't be that way. It all depends how we get there.
Oh man, I'm glad someone other than I'm glad someone other than me said it because I would have got so much hate if I had said it. It would have just been biased. That's so funny.
Okay.
Hey, listen, Jay. Listen, Jay. All right, listen. You guys typically get a lot of the praise. All right, so take some criticism.
Listen, I would take Roma over every other team too.
He had to try to dig one back. He didn't say Milan though. He didn't say Milan though. He didn't say Milan.
I just said Milan's in the best form of their entire season. You think I'm going to pick them?
For wanting Roma over Atalanta, to be honest, on the form we're on right now.
I only say that because of the psychological thing that Sporting going to get by them, so then Benfica will do the same shit.
Bringing it back in. Jay, it's funny you talk about the mentality and where you guys will be in form because, interestingly enough, this game is going to come immediately after me and Jay's little Lisbon Derby wraps up with the third round, which means it's going to be great for the podcast. The football gods have shined the light upon us because as soon as the Lisbon Jay and Nate Derby ends, we're going to have the Lorenza Derby where Milan have Roma, as we hinted in this draw. That is going to be a fun one. It's coming at an interesting time. I think Milan's got a couple of tough games. I'm not sure what Roma's fixtures look like, but Milan do have to go away to Fiorentina in the league, so it's going to be a tough one. Tell me, boys, Ange, I'll give you the first go. How comfortable or not comfortable you feel about that fixture?
Well, I'm glad you gave me the first go. I think I deservedly so because as I look at the fixtures now, Roma have not beaten Milan since about October 27th of 2019, so I'm pretty excited. I think this Roma team's a lot better than the teams in recent seasons, but I've always had a ton of confidence in Milan-Roma games, especially considering we were able to beat sides that were led by Jose Mourinho. Roma do have at least one world-class player, in my opinion, which is Paulo Dybala. I know everybody knows his threat that he brings, but yeah, this was definitely a favorable draw and something. I don't know. I tend to be a wizard sometimes with these things. I don't know if I'm good at feeling out the energy, but it's been pretty funny, these European campaigns for the last couple seasons. Obviously, last season, Milan drew Napoli, who, for viewers of the podcast that don't know, our father, my brother and I, our father was born right outside of Naples. He's a massive Napoli fan. So for Milan to draw Napoli in a late stage of a European competition was something that I almost never considered could happen in my lifetime, and now a year on from that, we've drawn Roma, who's my brother's side. It's honestly, it's been a pretty special couple of years, but with that being said, my chest will definitely be held ridiculously high if we knock Roma out of a European competition off the back of knocking Napoli out of a European competition. So it could be a really good time for me. Honestly, I think this could be 2 seasons that I look back on for the rest of my life, whether we go on to win the trophies or not. It's just, these are always special occasions within the tournament, so I'm pretty excited. I don't know how excited Gianluca is, but what I will say, I mean, you always kind of back yourself against a domestic opponent. Obviously, these sides know each other very well, and there's always the game within the game. I mean, Pioli could try and tinker and present something new to Roma that they've never seen before that blows up in our face, and vice versa. De Rossi might do the same thing. I mean, this is De Rossi's. These will be the 2 biggest games he's ever had in his young managerial career, so we'll see how they do. But what did you think of Gianluca? Were you excited when you drew Milan? Because I think, call a spade a spade, I think the three teams that nobody wanted were Liverpool, Leverkusen, and Milan. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. I sent a text in the group chat right after I saw the draw. I think Rome is just about as good as out if we're looking at historical form.
Yeah.
We suck every time we play against Roma. We're horrible, whether it's at the San Siro or at the Olimpico. We just never show up for the game. And you mentioned our fixture list. You thought Milan's fixture list was tough. I'll tell you the matches around these two legs. We have the derby against Lazio, the game before the first leg. We play Udinese in between, and then following the second leg, we play Bologna, Napoli, Juventus, Atalanta.
Yeah,
so that basically is going to decide our season in 6 of the next 7 games. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how we handle it. Obviously, like I said, it was nice that we got to rotate some players now in some of these fixtures, which is good going into this very crunch April for us. But yeah, I think out of any of the Roma Milan games that have happened in the past, I'm most intrigued to see how this goes. Obviously, because we've been playing so well under De Rossi, this is going to be something so different to what Milan have seen from us in the past. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how it goes. And if we do win, I'll be so happy. I don't think I'll ever stop talking about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, I mean, I like to make a joke and point out the historical fixtures, but I mean, I think you're only as good as you are on the day in which a match is played, and I completely agree. I'm actually a little concerned. I think this is probably the best Roma side we've seen in the last 5 years, and obviously, like I was saying, they haven't been able to beat Milan in the last 4 or 5 seasons, so they have 2 bites at the cherry. I would definitely. I don't think it's going to be completely smooth sailing. It almost never is in these types of European games where it's 2 domestic teams facing each other. There's going to be so much pressure on both coaches and both teams to get results and not embarrass themselves too bad. But yeah, I mean, these are the types of results that fan bases hold over each other for generations. It'll certainly be something I hold over my brother for generations. So
and for me too, like if I look to the only other real big game that De Rossi's coached so far, it was against Inter, and of course we lost 4-2, but I don't think we played bad by any means. I thought we played well, especially in the first half. I thought we were far better than Inter was. So I think there's a lot of hope from my side going into this fixture for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, Ange, if Milan are able to knock out Roma in back-to-back seasons like they did to Napoli, Ange might just be promoted to man of the house. So that's going to be a funny one to watch. But yeah, it's 2 back-to-back derbies here in the Sons of Pitches podcast. So make sure you keep staying tuned every single week because it's going to be a fun one. The last 2 legs of this quarterfinal for the Europa League fixtures, I should say, are going to be Liverpool-Atalanta, which is going to be a tough one for Atalanta, but they are very disciplined, like I said. So I think if someone can contain all that Klopp ball pressure, I think Atalanta have a decent shot at doing so. I think defensively they're pretty strong, and they can set up at 5 at the back at times, and then transition quickly to 5 going forward. As well as not a half bad matchup between Leverkusen and West Ham. Obviously, Leverkusen slipping up twice against Karabakh. West Ham are a much better team on paper, especially with some solid performances from Kudus and Paqueta and Bowen and the like. So it's going to be another tactical masterclass, I think, in that game. Xabi Alonso is going to have to get it right. But those last 2 fixtures, anybody any hot takes, any opinions on those?
Yeah, the Atalanta-Liverpool game I'm definitely really intrigued about. I mean, I think it was a couple seasons ago that Atalanta and Liverpool played each other in the Champions League, and I know this is a very different Atalanta team. They don't have Ilicic anymore, but Gasperini knows how to coach. He's a very tactically sound coach, and he, like you said, he's very organized. He knows how to tell his players what to do and get his ideas across, and I'm intrigued to see how Liverpool's pressing matches up with Atalanta's tactics.
yeah, and they'll be. I think they'll fancy themselves. I mean, especially Gasperini. I mean, Atalanta, when they played in the Champions League, they went to Anfield and won 2-0. I mean, they lost the first time 5-0 at home, but who knows? I mean, if they can get a favorable result away to Anfield, I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't think it's over before it's been played. I would absolutely love if Atalanta knocked them out. I think that would do wonders for the Serie A and even for Atalanta. But I mean, they're playing probably the best team in the Premier League this season. It's always going to be tough. I think it should be Liverpool getting the job done, but we'll see. I mean, they have rotated the squad. I think it'll be a rotated team for the first leg, and then depending on how the first leg goes, Klopp will either field his best 11 or a B team. So we'll see. I think.
I'm excited to see CDK play against Liverpool. To be honest.
Yeah, me too. I think where we're all in the same boat here, myself, Gianluca, and Jason is. I mean, even if we win our quarterfinal game, I mean, what the fuck? I mean, if the draws go how they're supposed to, and I mean, having to play Liverpool and Leverkusen in a semifinal, I mean, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I will say though, I do think West Ham is one that will definitely capitalize on any sorts of
slip-ups,
lapses and slip-ups from
100%.
Leverkusen. That's definitely one to watch because if they take the same approach as the Karabakh fixtures with big rotations and stuff like that and going down early, I don't think they'll have the same success in coming back.
Right.
The Bundesliga might be over by then, though, so they might be able to play their full 11.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think Aubameyang and Klaus are gonna kill Benfica.
I hope so.
Honestly, I don't really think
they'll be chilling in Antonio Silva's back pocket. I don't want to hear it.
Not on the Mendy's though. Funny how we didn't say that.
Dude, definitely not on Mendy's.
Oh man. Jesus. But it's shaping up to be definitely an interesting one because we could see, like you said, Benfica take Liverpool if the fixtures go kind of that way. Milan, Leverkusen, Roma, Leverkusen. I think it'd be interesting because obviously I would think we'd agree that the favorites as of right now might be Liverpool, Leverkusen going to the final on opposite sides of the bracket. I think that'd be an interesting fixture. I only bring that up just because with this being Klopp's swan song. And Xabi Alonso, one of the hottest names to take that seat. That'll be an interesting little final, especially if that's somehow decided already at the time that game gets played. So that's going to be one to watch for sure. The Europa League still looking hot as ever, as we have been calling it the whole time. We'll quickly run through the Conference League. We had some fun games where we did have USG beat Fenerbahce, but did not progress. We had Fiorentina draw Maccabi Haifa, meaning they went through on aggregate. We had Dynamo Zagreb lose to what? Oh, Pauk. You made me second think that, Gianluca, the whole prep talk before the thing. Pauk did smash Dynamo Zagreb to see their way through to the next round. Victoria Pleasant beat Servette to progress. Aston Villa smoked Ajax 4-0 to go through. Club Brugge 3-0 to Molde, and Lille drew Sturm Graz, seeing Lille progress through on aggregate, and Olympiacos smashing Maccabi Tel Aviv 6-1 to see themselves go through. And then the draws for that fixture are Aston Villa and Lille, where Olympiacos take on Fenerbahce, Victoria Pleasant take on Fiorentina, and Club Brugge take on Pauk. So a couple interesting fixtures, kind of balanced, not too many. I think there's a couple favorites. Obviously, You Italians might say Fiorentina are a favorite on their half of the bracket. Aston Villa obviously having some success in the Premier League, so they might be the heavy hitters on their side of the bracket, but I think it's still all to play for. Anybody could slip up at any moment, and any of these teams are capable of taking advantage of any slips. So it's another one to watch.
Yeah, go ahead. We all gotta go.
I was gonna say, I think Fiorentina is probably a shoo-in for the final on their side. Yeah. I mean, they have a super weak bracket, and they're really not that far outside of Europe. I think the other side of the bracket is too loaded. I would like to root for Fenerbahce, but Olympiacos has been in crazy form. They also concede a lot of goals, but Lille's a great team, and obviously Aston Villa, we were talking about top 4 in the Prem, and they still are. So, just it seems like it's very one-sided, but I mean, it should be shoo-in for Fiorentina.
I was going to say, I think Aston Villa actually drew the toughest team they could have drawn in this round of the tournament. I think Lille's going to give them a great game. There's a lot of players I really like. Jonathan David, particularly. I think he's going to cause a lot of problems to that back line.
You know, you bring up Jonathan David, and I was actually going to bring this up when this came. I was on Twitter, and somebody quoted Fabrizio's tweet about Jonathan David and said, "Listen, buddy, he's not getting a move. Stop talking about him." Said they've been trying to get Jonathan David a move for 4 seasons, 3 seasons. And I was laughing pretty hard because it's true. I mean, he hasn't moved, right?
So goals though, he's the second highest scorer in League One.
Yeah, for the last 2 seasons as well. Doesn't seem like anybody's calling for him.
I'm actually really glad you highlighted Fiorentina, Jason, because I know this is definitely biased, but I agree. I mean, this was a team that was just in the final last season, and and lost it, unfortunately. There's a little bit of a storyline going on with Fiorentina. I don't know how tapped in you guys are into Italian media, but one of their executives, is he the owner?
He's the executive. I think it's the owner's son.
Yeah, one of the executives at Fiorentina, Joe Baroni, had a very bad heart attack on the weekend. So we won't be able to talk about their game. The game was postponed. He was rushed to the hospital. Apparently, he's in stable condition. But yeah, there's a little bit of a storyline. I think Fiorentina might have a new boost of energy. I know it's always tough when something sad like that happens, a time of controversy, and I hope it doesn't distract them too much, and they'll be able to use it to their benefit, because I think it would be such a beautiful story if they were able to get a trophy. I mean, this is a Fiorentina side who had their captain pass away 5 or 6 years ago now with Davide Astori, tragically. I mean, I would love for Fiorentina to get a trophy. It's been a long time coming for them. They're always kind of knocking on the door of the European places in the Serie A. So I just wanted to throw some prayers out to Fiorentina and Joe Barone. They're going through a difficult moment, so it'd be really cool to see them grab a trophy from the Conference League.
Yeah, I agree. I think we all remember the days of Batistuta scoring bangers at Old Trafford in the Champions League, so it's always nice to see Fiorentina balling in Europe and playing some good stuff. And of course, yeah, you got to send some prayers out to Joe Perone. It's sad he's in stable but critical but stable condition, so hopefully he continues improving from there. But I do want to talk about Victoria Pilsen real quick. This is the furthest they've ever gone in a European tournament, so I think the Conference League is doing justice, bringing some of these smaller clubs up and letting them get some spotlight and some runs in some tournaments. So it's always cool to see some of the smaller teams competing.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. That the Conference League is basically doing what it was designed to be, is to give the rest of Europe a chance. And I think we've seen that in pretty much every edition of it. But if you look at it now, like the top two, the Europa League and the Champions League, per usual, is really only featuring the top 6 leagues. And then when you go down, you have 2 Greek teams, you got a Turkish team, Czech team, Belgium. You've got a lot of different representatives across the board, and I think they're all historic clubs. Like Olympiacos has always made good runs. Right. Same thing with Fenerbahce, Club Brugge, Fiorentina, like we just mentioned. Villa's won 2 Champions Leagues. Granted, the status of the club has changed significantly since then, but like it's getting historic clubs and really any club really the chance to prove themselves in Europe, get some extra prize money, get some new investment into the team, the leagues.
Yep.
So I'm very critical of all these things being money grabs. Same thing with the Nations League internationally. But I think both of those competitions, I give credit to UEFA where credit's due. While they were designed to make more money, they are definitely helping out with promoting good competition across clubs that really deserve it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Jay. You stole the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say all the clubs that are in this quarterfinal for the Conference League, we've seen once or twice, 3, 4, 5 times in our lifetimes in seasons, make a small run in the Champions League or the Europa League, give some of these bigger clubs a run for their money. I mean, how many times have we been on the edge of the seat for a club the size of Real Madrid almost getting knocked out by the club the size of Olympiacos? Right. It's nice to see that now, instead of just having those in their history, they can get a trophy in their cabinet that's significantly meaningful on a European stage.
And we've gotten good ties too with that Villa Ajax 4-0 in that second game. It's a crazy comeback from Olympiacos. So it's not like these are just like a bunch of bum games, just winning 2-1 or something like that, and just like nothing really of note. But we've gotten good games out of it and entertainment out of it. So I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, obviously we're getting down to the time in the European fixtures where we can watch more Conference League games, since usually there's like 12 games on the exact same time and it's much harder with only 4 games being played. in each competition. It'll be much easier to watch them all and give them the credit and the attention that they deserve. That being said, the time in our podcast has come where we will now pick our 5 best players of the week. Our 5-a-side, where we have a goalkeeper, a defender, midfielder, forward, and a flex from the outside position. As usual, we'll start in net with our net goalkeeper specialist. G, I know you have 3 names, I think it is, to shout outs for us. Please throw them out there and give us a little reason why.
I do, yeah. Well, obviously, the 2 goalkeepers who had some pretty outstanding performances in the shootouts deserve a shout. Raya and Oblak. They both made some pretty important saves. Obviously, I think they kind of helped out by the fact that the penalties are a little shit, in my opinion. But they made the saves. They did what was asked. As a goalkeeper, you're never expected really to make the save. I think if you're the shooter, you should score probably 95 times out of 100. But that's another argument in itself. But I also want to shout out Gregor Kobel. He's struggled a lot with injury this season, but I think he's probably the main reason that Dortmund went through in the second leg. He made a lot of important saves, 7 saves on the night in total. And he's a goalkeeper that's always impressed me. Every time I see him play, he makes a lot of outstanding saves, and he does a lot of the right things. So it was nice to see him come back into the team and have another good performance. But I think as of a main pick, I think it's kind of up in the air between the 3. I mean, you have to give Oblak and Raya the shout, I think, because they make saves in a shootout, and that really decides it. But Kobel, I think, is just as important in his performance in deciding Dortmund's tie as well. So
I think I want to pick David Raya just because of the quality of penalties in which he saved. I know something that we talked about when we talked about Atletico and Inter was just how crap the penalties were from Inter. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I think I probably could have saved Sanchez's too if I picked the right way. So I'm with David Raya.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think he keeps the clean sheet. He didn't have overly too much to do in the second leg, but keeping the clean sheet, then having the mentality to play the 120 minutes facing shots. And then, like you said, Ange obviously performing really well in the shootout. I also was going to say David Raya myself. So we'll lock in Raya as our goalkeeper. We maybe have 2 names. One name that I wanted to say, and anybody else can say something. I think Grimaldo's introduction. I know, Ange, you had your criticisms of Bayer Leverkusen, but I think his introduction to the game changes it and pulls back that game for them. Obviously, from the death, he's been instrumental for them all season. I think he's been in our 5-a-side once before, but he's talented enough to be here almost every single week. He's always in the shout running for it. But I think he has a really good shout this week. But any other names you guys want to throw out there, please?
Yeah, I'll shout out young Cabarsi. I thought he was outstanding, marshalling Osimhen over both legs. Really, I think he was great. He deserves a shout for me.
Yeah, I'll go opposite end. I was going to say opposite end of the age spectrum was Pep. That I would like to shout for that for his performance.
Okay.
I was going to say, Nate, disappointed he didn't pass me the choosing, so I could mention Kubarsi, but he's also my pick as well. Grimaldo, yeah, I find it hard putting him as a defender in this scenario just because of the way that they played when he came on. He played as a midfielder.
He didn't even have to defend when he came on. It's fair.
Yeah.
I actually have a teammate of Kubarsi's. I was very impressed with Joao Cancelo. I thought he was one of Barca's best players on the night. I think it was one of his better performances this season. So I think it almost has to be a Barcelona player, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I think Cancelo is a really good shout. I think Barcelona tactically played really well defensively, and obviously he gets on the score sheet as well, so it's hard to argue against it. So if we have no arguments, I am
Jay, what's
set.
the tiebreaker? We got two Kubarsi and 2 Cancelo.
Well, you know where I'm going to lean.
Goal, man.
You know where I'm going to lean. I'm going to lean towards the former Benfica player and the Portuguese player, no matter what. But no, it definitely was impressive for Kubarsi.
17-year-old, I think he gets it.
Yeah.
So it's okay, Jay. Just trust your gut. I just post tap in. I mean, any of the 5 of us could have scored it too.
Well, speak for yourself.
At least he's
no. I think I'll lean Cancelo just because I think he offers a lot going forward and some more experience that the team needs. So I think he plays more of an instrumental part than more than just the goal.
Yeah, Kubarsi has plenty of time to get into a five-a-side. He's
he'll
got a long career. He'll get in one of these. Midfields. Ange, I know you're dying to say a name, so I'll let you just say it. But I'm already gonna say that I agree with you. But please go ahead and say who you think that was the best.
Yeah, I thought Ruben Loftus-Cheek was pretty good. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's Mohamed Kudus. It's the only name. Iconic goal, iconic celebration, a huge win for West Ham in their season. It's nobody else but the Ghanaian. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree.
The only other player I would say is I was fucking mad impressed with Fermin Lopez. I thought he was unbelievable for Barca.
Actually,
we already have a Barcelona representative, but
That's what I was gonna say.
I mean,
Lopez as well.
he was honestly. I thought he was the man of the match. He was unbelievable, but it's got to be Kudus.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I'd almost let that slip from my mind. But yeah, Kudus obviously had a fantastic performance, scoring 2 great goals in that 5-0 thrashing. But yeah, the youngsters for Barcelona are making real shouts. So I can imagine these next couple of weeks, if Barcelona can keep some form, that we'll see these names pop up again.
They're gonna be in the five-a-sides when our kids take over. Sons of pitches.
Absolutely. And I think that this position is where we're going to have the most debate, and then probably end up filling out our flex. We got a lot of good performances from the forward position, scoring a lot of goals as there is in their contract description of their job, but they did it really well. A name, we can all throw out a name maybe, but I know Salah just by the numbers. I know he's a man of numbers. He has a lot of records, but three assists and a goal, 4 goal contributions in an absolute thrashing. Not an overly surprising victory, so it doesn't give me too much weight in that category. But from a sheer numbers point of view, he had an excellent week in Europe.
Yeah, I'm gonna shout out Pudence because I think ever since he made that move to Olympiacos, he's been fantastic. I'm sorry, we're just too quick right now. But no, the importance of that result and all that.
Yep.
To get that 6-1 win to come back from that, I think it was 4-1 down, and on aggregate. So I think that was huge. It was if you take into account the actual stage, I think that was one of the most impressive.
Yep.
I was gonna. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
I was gonna say just for clutch time performance, the man who bears my name, Mr. Patrick Schick. 2 goals in 5 minutes to, keep the unbeaten streak alive. I think it's pretty, theoretic. So I think he's got to deserve a shout too.
Like the pie was a great one. I felt like there was times where he was single-handedly dragging Atletico Madrid through that tie. He hit the post before he scored as well. I felt like it was all down to him. He was always putting himself in the right place at the right time. Every chance seemed like it was falling to him. And I felt like if anybody was going to go and score the equalizer or score a winner, it was going to be Depay. So I like him. But we have a lot of good super subs and performances at striker.
Yeah, I guess you can tell we're brothers because I was actually the one that wrote Depay's name down for the forward position because I agree. I was pretty impressed with the way he brought energy to the Atletico Madrid side. He kind of gave them an extra gear in the engine to help them kick on. But if I can play the role of decider, I think I'm gonna pick. I don't want to pick Patrick Schick actually.
You do, but you just. I think I will.
I think I will pick Patrick Schick. I think I will pick Patrick Schick. I'm just pissed at the way they won, to be honest. But
yeah, we did snub Grimaldo from the comeback credit, so I think Patrick Schick deserves it. Obviously, being the man who puts the ball in the back of the net twice. But that leaves our flex from any of the other players we named. Of course, the debate, we'll take a little vote, but the debate is the fact that Depay had a great goal to send them into PKs in extra time. And then, like we mentioned, that the mentality to put that absolutely phenomenal penalty in on the first try for Atletico Madrid sets up for Inter Milan to have a serious battle mentally for the rest of that one. And obviously they win it. And then, of course, the importance of Pudence in that comeback that we kind of glazed over. And then, of course, Salah with 4 direct goal contributions. So, if
what about Fermin? Fermin doesn't get a shout in that flex, you don't think?
I'm sure you probably didn't think of this one, but the gentleman from Atalanta had 2 assists against your team. He had a fantastic game as well. So, I'm calling whoever you guys choose. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Fermin, just because of It's not even this game, but I'm having bias from the last couple weeks. He scored. He's been playing great. I don't know. At 20 years old, you get slotted in. It's just different gravy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I want to pick Prudence just because of the way they came back.
Yeah,
was kind of crazy. I know Salah has the volume of goal contributions compared to everybody, but come on, the tie was
It was a
bad.
nothing game.
Yeah.
Shouldn't even have picked him anyway, to be honest. And I know it's hard because I shouted Fermin too. I wanted to give him love, but I'm kind of with Prudence. Let's do a hipster pick from Olympiacos. I like that.
I like it too.
Yeah, it gives us a little bit of flavor from all three competitions too. So if we're in agreement, I think Puddin slots in there. So just to recap, we do have Raya in net after his formidable contributions in the penalty shootout. We had Cancelo with a goal contribution as well as some great defending from Barcelona. Kudus with an excellent performance from the left wing with 2 goals. Patrick Schick with 2 goals in 90 plus to save Bayer Leverkusen's a winless season and lossless season, unbeaten season. And potentially save a double on the season. And then, of course, Pudins for an absolute unreal comeback by Olympiacos to overcome a huge deficit on aggregate to round out the team. It's been a hell of a ride so far in these competitions, going to the quarterfinals. Last couple stages, the showpiece games have been set. We do have a Lorenza derby to look forward to in Europe. We are going to have a weekly roundup coming out later this week. Make sure you keep your eyes on that one. Keep your eyes on all of our social media. And as always, keep being a son of a pitch.